Story time with Stephanie
Hi,
Story.
I'm art historical novelist Stephanie Storey. Welcome to my show Story Time, where I get to talk to other writers about their passions and their process and projects and all kinds of things. I am very excited about my guest today because we are both from the Hollywood land. So we'll have a lot to talk about. He is an Oscar nominated writer of a little movie you might have heard of called Sleepless in Seattle. But he is out just this year with a literary actual novel debut. Come on. He wrote a novel, people. It's called Attachments. I cannot wait to talk to him about it. I was going to speed through reading it just to have this conversation with him. Instead, I'm enjoying it so much. I'm taking my sweet time. Which is a great thing. I am loving it so much. I am going to nurture this thing and enjoy it as I read it. Welcome to the show, Jeff Arch.
Thank you. I love when people read slowly for that reason, and it's great.
It's just the characters are compelling and the story's compelling, and I just want to enjoy it. I don't just want to like race through and skim while I'm cooking dinner. I actually want to absorb this novel and this story, which is always such a nice feeling when you get to a book like that. So before I get to other questions, please, since I don't want to tell people at home what your book is about because I don't want to spoil anything, please tell our viewers at home about your book and how you got here. Give us the little pitch.
Well, it's about three best friends who went to boarding school, and a very bad thing happened while they were there, and they all went different directions. And they found a teacher there, the dean of the school, became very influential in all three of their lives and really became a surrogate father to them. All three of them had father problems, and this guy just filled that gap. And almost 20 years after they leave the school, he has a stroke. And he calls out the names of these two guys who were best friends, and nobody can figure out, why he wanted them. His wife knows who they are, but not why he asked for them. He has a teenage son who doesn't know who they are or why he asked for them. The people themselves obviously know who he is, but they don't know why he asked. They just know if he asked, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to go back. So it's almost like everybody just ran away from the scene of a crime and never talked about it. And then 20 years later, they have to go back to the scene of the crime, except it wasn't a crime of the heart, but it wasn't nobody broke any laws. It's told in alternating points of view. I wrote short chapters for a reason, but it takes 6 chapters to introduce the 6 main characters. And from then on, they're each pursuing their own version of the same goal. Everybody has an agenda. There's no bad guy. I never needed to have a villain or a negative force in this story because it's just, in fact, when I look back, pretty much everything I write is about people who can't get out of their own way. They don't need a bad guy. So these people have messed up their lives, and an incident happens that forces them to come back and deal with it.
Everything you write is people who can't get out of their own way. Is that like when you look back over your entire career, you think that's the thing that drives most of the things you write?
I wrote a Disney movie called Iron Will, and I inherited that script. It was for kids, so there had to be a bad guy. Aside from that, I don't know, movies, TV scripts, no. I don't have villains. There has to be a threat. As a writer, there has to be a threat, but there doesn't have to be a villain. And Sleepless, in Seattle, the threat was there's no bad guy in that. The threat was that we know these two people are perfect for each other, and they're not going to meet unless something really big and impossible happens. So there was a threat, that we worry about the whole time. And in this story, the threats everywhere. It's just I don't know what you perceive, but a lot of people are messed up in the beginning. They're in a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. And they've been dancing around that pain this whole time, and now this thing forces them to face it.
Okay, writing a novel that has interwoven stories is not the easiest kind of novel to conquer when it is your debut in a novel form. Why did you feel like this story needed, because I love it, like I do love getting the different perspectives of this and following different people, but it is not the easiest thing to do. Why did you feel like this story needed those different perspectives?
You know, I think the technique came before the story in a lot of ways. I had a friend in high school who wrote a short story, and I obviously never forgot it. This is like 1971, and he had little chapter headings of the characters in the story. And I don't remember if it was their point of view, but it would say, you know, Robert or Stephen or something. And I thought, that is so cool. I got to use that one day. And this is way before I ever knew I was going to write. I was in high school. I was going to be a filmmaker. I wasn't going to be a writer. Uh, but then, you know, movies, you can't do this. And my career was writing movies. But when I thought of this story and did try it as a movie and it did not work, and it was just banging on the door saying, "You idiot! I'm supposed to be a book," and that's just the way it is. And so I thought, well, what got me excited enough about doing it was that I'm like, oh, you know what? I can use that technique from 1971 that guy turned me on to, and I called him up recently, and we've been, because of Facebook, in sporadic touch over the years, and I said, listen, do you remember that story? And he said, yeah, I won an award for it. I said, well, I stole it, man. I wrote a book and I used that technique. And he said, I stole it from William Faulkner. And so, you know, it's out there. I think doing it as hard as that was, any other way probably would have been harder. It's the only way I could figure out how to approach this. And also, I'm just not set up to do the easy thing. I mean, romantic comedies are hard, and try one where the people don't meet. I mean, if I could think of something easy, sometimes I pray for that. Just give me an easy one. But you know, they're not supposed to be easy. We're supposed to grow, and you only grow against resistance.
You started out as a filmmaker, and then you're a screenwriter. What made you finally go, that's it, I'm gonna, and it won't work as a film? What made you finally go, that's it, I'm gonna have to do the thing, I'm gonna have to sit down and actually write the novel?
Screenplays are about 100 years old. You know, books go all the way back, and something about that challenge of, I'm not hiding behind Tom Hanks, I'm not hiding behind a cameraman and lights, I'm not hiding behind music, I'm not hiding behind anything. This is me and you, mano a mano. That there's something really, that's like extreme sports to me. That's like bungee jumping to me, because there's nothing but the words and the reader. And I love that relationship, and it's as old as history. It's as old as written history. So to be part of that, I think all that stuff was calling me, and I just didn't really know it. It came in the form of a story that wouldn't let go.
It was so interesting that you said you got to hide behind Tom Hanks, or hide behind the director, or hide behind the set designers or whoever. That's true, but there is also something great about, because filmmaking is such a collaborative process. There is also something amazing about being in control of the entire world and not having to give away that part to an actor or give away that part to somebody else. Was that part of the liberation, that you got to actually be king? I mean, because in Hollywood, no offense, screenwriter's not king. I mean, we're not, but
But you know, there's nothing like typing the words, "It is raining," you know, and then 18 months later, sitting in some city you don't live in, watching them make rain because you wrote that. That's the coolest kind of power there is. So, I mean, I love it, because, you know, movies, you know, you gotta write in shorthand. You're not really writing for a reader experience. You're writing for different departments to interpret. But if you do it, if you say interior diner day, and you just say, you know, a bad attempt at a retro diner, that's all you need to say. And then the art department, the picture department, the acting, the costumes, it's almost like you're saying, here's the kitchen. You know, every house has to have a kitchen, and every story has to have this. You know, it's really, the architecture analogy works all the way through. But what you put on the walls, you know, the wall has to be there, but how you decorate this kitchen, how you orient this kitchen, how it feels to come into it, that's the art part of the craft.
I was so stunned when I left Hollywood, and not that I really left, but when I transitioned and I suddenly found myself in the publishing industry, that people did actually send me the whole thing, and I got to be in charge of all of the edits, and I got to approve an edit or not. That it was all my world, that it was all my choice. Yes, I had an editor who recommended things. And yes, someone else designed the cover, but basically it was all mine. And how shocking that was, and how a little bit intimidating that was.
Yeah.
After working in such a collaborative industry where I'm used to having people sort of
It can.
check my choices and say, no, I can do this better, or oh, look at what I
Yeah.
can contribute. Was that daunting when you sat and suddenly you had to be the actor and suddenly you had to be the set designer? Was there any of that that was like, oh, I wish I had a casting director here with me, or any piece? Or was it just joy to do it on your own?
It was just, it's the same thing every day. I got to figure out how to paint myself out of the corner that I painted myself into last night. And whether it's a movie or a book, that's the job. you know, I did not know what was going to happen next. And which I think keeps any story alive. I mean, there are people who, you know them. They'll I don't know what your method is, but they will index card every single scene. They'll have this grid covering a whole wall before they ever. And then you got the ones who just say, oh, well, a leaf falls onto a sidewalk. That's my first sentence. And I don't know what the hell. We'll just see what happens. I'm somewhere in the middle where I need to know a couple of things. With Sleepless, I knew two people are going to meet on the last page on top of the Empire Building on Valentine's Day. And knowing that had to happen by page 110 informed every decision I made. Because I would just say, does this get them there? If it doesn't, I couldn't, I had to throw it out. Attachments, it was, I knew it was 3 kids, a teacher, a betrayal, and a runaway. And that's all I knew. And I knew the kid that ran away was going to get involved in Eastern religion.
One of the things that you said during that, it was really interesting, is something to the effect of, and then a lot of the things you were talking about fell into this category. It was, I can only write what I know. This is set in a boarding school. You grew up going to boarding school, right?
I went to a boarding school just like this for about 2 years. It wasn't the Rolling Hills Dead Poet Society, chandeliers, Hogwarts kind of. It was not that. It looked like one, but it was really in the middle of a kind of a junky part of the country that you really had to look hard for beauty. So it wasn't this bucolic, cut off from the world setting. It was smack dab in the middle of the town that was across the river from a city that was very depressed.
So when you do look back at your life and you're using an element of your life in your writing, whether you're using it in this book with the boarding school, that kind of thing, or in other screenplays, how much do you personally dump of yourself into what you're writing, and how much do you hold back and rely on the fiction? Like where's that line? Like, because I think every, certainly novelist, you're basically writing memoir. I mean, you're basically just dumping your soul onto a page, but you also have to hold something back and leave room for just the imagination. So where do you personally walk that line in your writing between how much of yourself to reveal and how much of your made up life you reveal?
That's really interesting, Stephanie. I think sometimes they go so hand in hand that it's hard to tease them out. I mean, on one page, I could take you through any single page, and I bet there'd be something that happened from 5 years old to 16 years old to 45. It's like if they say that everything that ever happened, we're recording it. The way our brain is, our brains are filtering mechanisms. But, if you read or buy into any of the near-death stuff when you get your life review, you see every single thought you ever had. So knowing what needs to happen is the craft. And then the thing that comes up in your mind to put there, that's the art, that's the memory, that's the part that's memoir. So, there's something in there about flat waterlogged branches making somebody's, making an image of a face. I remember being 5 years old and looking out my window when I was supposed to be taking a nap, and I saw the branches make a face. And that's from 5 years old, and that went in there. So I didn't plan it. I need space between that line of dialogue and that line of dialogue. So what's going on in her head? Okay, she's a mother who lost a child. So, the craft part of me knew you need to get into this a little bit and give some examples of like what it's like to lose a child. I never lost a child. Thank God, and I knock on everything wood here. But it is all memoir, but it's not really true and honest memoir, because you're putting things where they're the most effective, not necessarily where they happen.
My experience with this, and you may think I'm crazy and you may go, no, I'm not answering that, and that's fine. But my experience with this was like on this tiny of a level. So when my first book came out, I thought nobody would read it, right? Like I thought my mom and her book club would read it, and that would be it. And because no one reads books. Anyway, I thought nobody would read it. It'd be fine. That's not what happened. I get a rave New York Times review. It gets translated into languages. People read it, and I'm like, oh, that's sort of awful. I mean, it's great, but it's sort of terrifying. So I was thinking about this, and that's like on this tiny of a level. Whereas Sleepless in Seattle back in 1993, was it just completely overwhelming to sit down and write again? Or were you okay with that? Did you have that moment of like, oh my God, now all anybody's gonna say, like today, that's how I introduced you. That's all anybody's gonna introduce me is that for the rest of my life. It's too overwhelming. It's too much. Did you have any of that feeling? Do you still have that when you sit down to write, or did you just absorb that and move right on?
The alternative is nobody hearing about you, nobody caring, nobody reading your stuff. There's a bumper sticker out there that says, my worst day fishing is better than my best day anywhere else, and something like that. And my worst day since I got into the business that I wanted to be in all my life is still better than not being in the business would have been. So, when it all comes together, I certainly feel like the things that all come together were meant to. There's a great line, a guiding life in Butch Cassidy, where Redford says at the end, I just don't want to get there and find out it stinks. And that's really a guiding principle for me, because it's so hard to get there, Stephanie. You knew it. You participated in this. You still do. And then to look around and have no friends, or you screwed up how you spend your money, or you just mess things up, and here you're home and you have this Oscar, but it's empty. That the only people you impressed are the kind of people that will only be impressed if you have an Oscar, and that's not real people. So it's this whole holistic thing of I don't want to get, it's hard enough to get there. I want to get there and have it be great, have it not stink. And the only way to do that is to make it great the whole way along, to find the greatness, no matter how shitty the day is. And it'll bring you to your knees, what happens here. But if you're a writer, you're going to write. And if you're a writer, you have one job, and that is to get people to complete strangers to turn a page. And that's it. And it simplifies things. But how hard is that to do? As simple as it is, that's your job. It's the reader. It's the person. I've talked to people all over the world now, and they're telling me the same thing. And that's why you do it. I mean, I did it for that reason before I knew there was money in it. I would write things down as a little kid, and then I would hear in another room, someone said, "You see what Jeff did?" And they I'm 7, 8 years old, and I hear grown-ups in the other room laughing. And but I did that 3 weeks ago, so here I am getting paid, paid with laughter and attention for something I did 3 weeks ago, and I'm not even in the room. So that pattern was set up early when I was a kid. And what I didn't realize at the time, but that's the concept of royalties. You get paid later for something you did already. So if someone tells me 31 years after I wrote Sleepless in Seattle, if someone tells me how it affected them, oh my God, that feels incredible. I mean, all these years later, it feels amazing. So I'm starting to hear this now. I would like to live 30 more years, so 30 years from now, hear about how, attachments help somebody in their life. But Stephanie, I'm hearing people say it got them through grief and loss, and they're making up with old friends, and it's changing, behaviors. And, with Sleepless, I had this conscious intention that I was going to send a Valentine to the whole planet. I just felt we need this now. This is 1990, things were bad. We just come out of it. We needed this, and it wasn't like, I mean, my first thing was just tell a love story where they don't meet till the last page. But the feeling in me was, I'm going to see if I can, how cool would it be? Again, how cool would it be to send a Valentine to the whole planet? And specifically ask this question: how do I get two people to walk out of a movie theater in Finland holding hands? And that exact question I asked the night I got the idea. Instead of how do I get in the newspaper? How do I get, People magazine? It wasn't anything. It was just, how do I get two people to it's a magic trick. It's pulling a rabbit out of a hat. How do I? And then I got invited to speak in Helsinki, and I'm standing in front of a room of 500 people that have seen the movie. And I don't know if you know, been to Finland, but they're pretty stern people, and it's hard to get a laugh out of them. But, they were lighthearted and like, wow, these are the people that walked out of a movie theater holding hands because I said something 3 years earlier. And and so this, with attachments, I'm finding out that I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just knew I got this premise: 3 kids, a betrayal, a teacher, a runaway, and a guy who goes off to the east. That's all I knew, and every day was figure this out. But it's about healing, and it really is about people who are broken in the beginning. And I won't spoil who's still standing at the end or anything, but it's about healing.
Because so much of this interview you've talked about film and filmmaking, but then when you talk about noveling, you're like lighting up. Like you're like getting all excited, and you're like all into it, and it's beautiful to see. So now that you have written this one, is your next project a film or a novel, or which do you have a preference, or is it just always going to be wherever the story finds its best home?
Thank you. I'm in the middle now of something that I spent 2 years trying to write as a movie, and there was no joy in it. There was no, it was a great story. I loved it, but I couldn't get it to sing. And then one day, smacked myself on the head and said, "You idiot, this is supposed to be a TV series." And now, instead of squeezing all this stuff into 90 minutes, you can do 30 minutes 8 times. So instead of a 90-minute story, I'm telling a 204 story, which is like 2 feature films worth, but 8 30-minute episodes. And I'm having a blast. The thing wanted to be a series, and it wouldn't work as a movie. And I was going in miserable. What the hell am I doing this for? This isn't a have to anymore. I'm a writer and I want to write, but I'm not sitting here to punish myself. Not for no reason. If there's going to be a breakthrough, fine. But the breakthrough this time was, idiot, it's supposed to be a series. So I'm writing a series now. I sort of put it on pause this winter and spring, take care of attachments, and I'll probably get back to it this summer. And there is another book that I've been supposed to write even longer, since the early 80s, since my daughter was born, 1985. Then that's probably going to be the last book, and I'm probably going to do the script adaptation for Attachments. So that's 3 projects, and I'm 66 years old, and that's not old. But after those 3, I'm going to be happy to be done, because I always wanted to be a writer, but I never knew what it was going to be like to do it for 45 years. And I don't know if I want to be dealing with publishers and agents, and all the things that we're blessed to have. I don't know if I don't want to do this. At 70, it doesn't seem like this is a game I want to still be playing. I don't have a vision for 70, but I think it has more to do with lying on a sand dune with a dog and nothing to do, rather than I got to do these edits. And again, I don't want to sound spoiled. I've been doing this for a really long time. But thank you, because it's interesting that you said that there's more joy and more passion in the book now because the book is finished. Ask me, there's one chapter in here. There's one chapter that I probably, without any exaggeration, probably spent a whole year just on one chapter, just getting that right, because it was so pivotal. It's sort of that moment where everything has to start coming back. And again, and any writer listening, how to sometimes you can't incorporate the information into the emotion, so you have to separate information from emotion. So the whole challenge with this was, these characters, if they haven't seen each other in a long time, they can't be talking about history. They can't be talking about, information. So where do you put that information so that they can talk about completely unrelated stuff, but all that stuff's getting said anyway? So again, that's the art and that's the craft. If you get the craft, you figure out, okay, how to say it in dialogue, and then, just that internal clock of when to stop. Okay, now we got to explain something, but you have the whole book to do the exposition. And what a lot of people do mistakenly is think you got to load it up all front. And nobody wants information. We want emotion. I did learn this cinematic, way of writing, again, from rock and roll imagery, how to crunch something down into just a tiny little image. But where that image is and when that image is and what's before it and what's after it, that's what brings all the emotion to it. But still, the bitch of this whole thing is the information. How do you tell them what they need to know so that they can, is the context. I hate it, and I can't imagine, I never met a writer who liked that part, and people don't know. This is fun to sit here and do this, but people do not know what a freaking pain in the ass it is to just figure out how to get this information out, but not have the character be the one that says it.
Your dedication to the writing craft is a beautiful thing. How serious you are about it. And no, because I talked to a lot of writers, and not all writers are just as dedicated and thoughtful and as obsessed about this stuff as I am. Because as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, I agree. Like, I agree with all that. I've been down that road. Oh my gosh, the chapter that takes a year. Yes. But there are a lot of people who do not take it that seriously. And so I love it. And you know what? It comes through in this book. Like, from the first page, you're like, oh, I'm in the hands of a really skilled writer. This is going to be great. Like, from the first moments. So congratulations on having a book out into the world, not just movies. Everybody's going to love it. They're going to read it. It's going to be great. And thank you for all of your writing in the world, of course. I mean, come on. Sleepless in Seattle was a Valentine to the world, and we have you to thank for it. So I love you. Thank you.
Story time with Stephanie Storey. Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie Storey.